on Jerusalem Dateline. This week on Jerusalem Dateline, U.S. President Donald Trump makes a bold statement about Christian refugees from the Middle East.
I thought it was very, very unfair. So we are going to help them.
Plus, a small Jewish community in the biblical heartland of Israel is dismantled.
This is the place. All the story of the Bible is here.
More of our interview with senior Trump advisor Rudy Giuliani, and see how one refugee family is getting the help they need. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Recently, CBN News' David Brody sat down with U.S. President Donald Trump for an exclusive interview. Their interview discussed a wide range of issues, including the plight of Christian refugees of the Middle East.
Persecuted Christians, we've talked about this overseas. Right. The refugee program that, or the refugee changes you're looking to make, as it relates to persecuted Christians, do you see them as kind of a priority here?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, they've been horribly treated. Do you know, if you were a Christian in Syria, it was impossible, at least very, very tough to get into the United States. If you were a Muslim, you could come in. But if you were a Christian, it was almost impossible. And the reason that was so unfair is that everybody was persecuted, in all fairness, but they were chopping off the heads of everybody, but more so the Christians. And I thought it was very, very unfair. So we are going to help them.
After Trump's statement, some evangelical Christians are divided as to whether or not Christian refugees should be given priority status. They say the act of putting one religion ahead of others sets a dangerous precedent. Others worry that expediting refugee entry for Christians will only lead to more persecution. But Representative Chris Smith, a Republican from New Jersey, disagrees. He says Christian refugees do need to be prioritized because they're in a more difficult position. As religious minorities, they don't feel safe in UN refugee camps, which means they don't have access to the refugee program.
When you have been targeted for genocide, the elimination, the evisceration of all of your people in whole or in part, simply because you happen to be Christian, that begs the question on how much we need to be doing, and that it's been non-existent. They also need, in my opinion, the ability to, if they can't go back to Mosul, for example, because it's just too dangerous and security is a big issue, the ability to get processed, get the interview to come to the United States. I mean, these Christian communities can be vetted easier than some because they know each other. They're with their pastor. They're with their faith community. They moved in mass and now are living in Erbil, most of them, 70,000. And it seems to me that some, and most of them, still want to go back to their homelands. But if some want to come here because, for the sake of their children, for example, they should at least get the interview and then begin the vetting process. Right now, they're not even getting the interview. They're not in the UNHCR camps, the UN camps. They're unwelcomed there. The women are raped and harassed. The men are discriminated against inside the camps, so they choose to go elsewhere. And that's why they have moved en masse to places like Erbil, where they are safer, but then they have no access to the process to get asylum. My new bill would establish a P2 category. It's just the designation so that these victims at least have access to the interview to make their case as to whether or not they're eligible for asylum.
Representative Smith recently returned from a visit to the city of Erbil in northern Iraq. Another member of Congress, Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, went to the Syrian city of Aleppo and met with an evangelical minister. She filmed some of her trip and found a church still standing in a battered city in the midst of chaos and war.
As a civilized people, we are targeted by these terrorists because they don't want neither the man be man nor the woman to be a woman. They want slaves, and we will not be slaves.
Just two more unexploded.
Our church was established in 1848. but the building goes beyond that. And we used to worship here until 2012 July. On July, when we came to the church to worship, we faced some gangs in who asked us to leave the church. So we left the church. Later, the backyard of the church was targeted by them and exploded by them. Later on, at the end of the year, maybe on November of 2012, they bombed the church from down and exploded all. And they were happy on their websites, being proud to say that we destroyed people who worship three gods. At the same time, as a community, as you see all around you, we come here just to say that they thought that the church is the building, but the church was never the building. The church is the community. And we know that we are called to be the salt of the world and the light of the world. And we know that we have mission in this country. All who are modern people who think in the terms of this age are targeted by them. They want this country to be bad. They want us not to be improved and developed as a community. And their plan is to have an Islamic state in this country. And they didn't read the history. They didn't know that Christianity was spread out from this country, from Antioch. So we will continue being here. And really we feel proud that we received you in our country. I know very well what are the obligations over you to not come. But really, we will continue to be human beings here. We are in we have very great attitude to you to be here. So now we can speak. Not only our partners as a church in the West are with us, also there are congressmen who feel with us and express their emotions with us in our suffering in this country. Lord, we thank you for everybody who is with us now, and we ask you to continue with us in our journey in this country in order that we will not lose our identity as a salt of the world and as a light of the world. In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, through the Holy Spirit, we raise our prayer to you, Father. Please listen us and answer our prayers. Amen.
Up next, a look at what's behind the controversy of one Jewish community in the biblical heartland of Israel.
This is the way of Abraham, of Yitzchak, of Yaakov. This is the place, not Tel Aviv. All the story of the Bible is here.
For the first time in more than 25 years, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu pledged to establish a new settlement in Samaria, also known as the West Bank. Netanyahu's announcement came shortly after Israeli police began dismantling what was called an illegal outpost. In the meantime, Israel is expecting a different attitude in the White House towards settlements under President Donald Trump. Here's CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl with the story from Amona.
Israelis living in biblical Judea and Samaria are hoping scenes like these won't be repeated now that President Trump is in office.
Netanyahu now, in this time, this moment after Ammon and after Ofra tomorrow, need to say to Trump and to all the world that we will be here forever and we will build here and bring more Jewish for Judah and Samaria, because this is our land, our historical, our Bible start from here.
This is Amona. Much of the world would call it an illegal outpost, but to the 42 families that live here, it's home. About 3,000 security forces and police have come to remove them from this hilltop home.
These people's lives are going to be changed forever. Their children will be traumatized. I saw them taking out the little kids this morning.
I'm a child in Israel. I also want a home. And if there's a court case against me, I also need a home in the land of Israel.
The evacuation ended with violent clashes at the synagogue between some of those who came to protest the raising of the settlement and police. Hundreds of other Israelis from near and far came to stand peacefully in solidarity with those losing their homes.
I love this country, I love this state, I love Israel. I do all what I can do to my people. And in this moment, I just come here to be with my brother.
Like my hand. It hurts me so much to see all the soldiers here hitting the other hand. It's like one hand hitting the other, like cancer. I'm here actually to connect, to identify, to connect with my people, with the pain of my people, to be at this time crucial to the people of Israel, and to express solidarity, the desire to settle the land, to build it.
This is the way of Abraham, of Yitzchak, of Yaakov. This is the place, not Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is too, but this is the place. All the story of the Bible is here.
Israel's High Court ordered the destruction of the 20-year-old hilltop community after it ruled in favor of a Palestinian claim that it was built on private land. The international community considers all Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria, also known as the West Bank, to be illegal, but almost all of the 430,000 Israelis who live there live in communities built on Israeli state land and not private Palestinian property.
In the Six-Day War, after 1967, we returned here, and together with all the governments, the Likud and also the Labour Party, we established settlements. We returned home. This is terrible that we're dismantling settlements in the land of Israel.
Others said removing the Israelis won't bring peace.
And the reason it's so tragic is that this hill is going to stay barren. No good will come out of it. This will not promote peace in any way.
It's the first time in more than 10 years that Israel has evacuated Israelis from disputed land. In the summer of 2005, Israel uprooted more than 9,000 Israelis from 21 communities in the Gaza Strip and 4 in the northern West Bank in what became known as the disengagement. Now, with Trump in the White House, many Israelis are hoping the evacuation at Amona will be the last.
Julie, you were up there in Amona. Tell us some of your impressions. It seemed like a very chaotic scene.
Yeah, it was. In the beginning, it was quite orderly, but it was very sad. The Israeli police, the police spokesman kept saying again and again, we're only doing this because there's a court order. So the police weren't happy about doing it, about having to take their fellow Israelis off of the hill. The people weren't happy about having to be taken off. And like I said, in the beginning, it was very orderly. Some of the more violent scenes came later on.
Yeah, you could see from many of the people in that story, they were quite upset. Give us some history and some context, because this can be a complicated issue, and sometimes people see some video and they just don't know what's going on. So what's some of the background to Amona?
Well, as we said in the story, Amona has been there for around 20 years. There was another evacuation of Amona about 11 years ago. Some of the houses were destroyed, and many of these people have lived there nearly 20 years. Suddenly, at some point along the way, a Palestinian, some people say he was put up to it by Israeli left-wingers, went to the Supreme Court and said, this is my land, this is private land. Most of the land that settlements are built on belonged to the Kingdom of Jordan, and when Israel took over in the 1967 war, that became state land. So that actually it doesn't belong to private Palestinians. But now a private Palestinian said, this is my land, and the Supreme Court said, well, okay, we'll believe you. Apparently they had some deeds or some documents, though others say it wasn't really proven. Yeah, it's a little bit murky.
A little bit complicated. Now, the White House made a statement about not only what Amona, they didn't talk about that, but they did talk about what Benjamin Netanyahu did. He announced for the first time in more than 25 years a new settlement, and this is part of their statement. It says, while we don't believe the existence of settlements is an impediment to peace, something the Obama administration would probably never say, but they said the construction of new settlements or the expansion of existing settlements beyond their current borders may not be helpful in achieving the goal of peace between Israelis and Palestinians. How do you interpret that statement by the White House?
Well, I think they're being very, very cautious. I don't think they want to jump quite on the bandwagon. They said further on in that statement that they haven't really established a policy regarding the settlements yet. We know that the coming ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, has been a big supporter of settlements. He's contributed finances. Even President Trump has contributed at some point in honor of David Friedman money towards some of the settlements. So it seems like they're treading lightly at this point, trying not to make any more enemies, but also he said he would discuss it more with Netanyahu when he comes in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that'll be February 15th, I guess, when they'll be meeting. And, well, thank you, Julie, for your expertise and understanding about this. And this is one issue that we're going to continue to be reporting on and seeing in the years to come. Coming up, more of our interview with Rudy Giuliani, why he believes the U.S. needs to stand with Israel.
The feelings about Israel in the United States over the last 10 to 15 years have become stronger and stronger.
Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani is one of U.S. President Trump's closest advisors. Here's another segment of our interview with Giuliani about why he thinks it's so important to stand with Israel and why the Bible is a big part of why the Jewish people belong in the Promised Land. 20 years ago, you famously rode on Bus 18 right after a terror attack with, at the time, Mayor Olmert.
I did.
And as a show of solidarity, do you still feel that same sense of solidarity?
Stronger than ever. I would say the feelings about Israel in the United States over the last 10 to 15 years have become stronger and stronger. I think maybe the attack of September 11 has something to do with that. I think it made most Americans realize that Israel and the United States are fighting the same enemy, that we have basically the same values. You can't believe the amount of respect and love that there is in the United States for Israel. Not just in the obvious places that it's always been, New York, Los Angeles, but in the heartland of America. You look at the evangelical Christian churches, they're probably the biggest supporters of Israel. I remember speaking at the National Conference of Christians and Jews, and one of my Jewish friends said, you're going to get more support from Israel from the Christians than from the Jews.
Have you found that to be true?
Yes, in some ways, yes. But this is a very good thing. I mean, it's a major change. It's meant, to a large extent, the elimination of anti-Semitism in the United States, and it has created a real bond between the United States, the heartland of the United States, and Israel. And I'm not sure that all Israelis know that. And I think they may not know it because of President Obama and the way he acted for the last 8 years. That wasn't consistent with the views of the vast majority of Americans. I think they're going to see with President Trump that this is a very, very strong mutual relationship.
Let me read your quote from Prime Minister Ben-Gurion. He said back in 1936, "Our right to the land of Israel is not given by the British government nor by the Balfour Declaration. It's much older. The Bible is our mandate to the land." Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree completely with that quote, and I would say that is the basis for the Christian support for the state of Israel. And also, in my own case, I have tremendous admiration for the respect that the Jewish state shows for the Christian sites that are here. And remember what it was like before that. And also see the difference with some of the Christian sites that have been turned over to the Palestinian Authority, like in Bethlehem. Much more respect, much more openness, complete tolerance, and very, very different attitude than in the Palestinian Authority, where Christians are treated, well, I remember when they took nuns hostages, Orthodox nuns hostages, and some of the damage they've done to our churches, and you don't have any of that in Israel. So I think as a Christian, I feel very, very comfortable with our holy sites in the hands of a government that has a rule of law, has democracy, and has tremendous respect for religion. After all, our religion emerged from their religion. And I think we understand that Jesus, I always say this, coming from New York with a large Jewish population, Jesus died a Jew. And from that, our religion emerged. And we should be very grateful for that.
Coming up, see how this family found hope and help in the aftermath of war.
We barely made it out of Syria, but life here has been very hard.
The Syrian civil war has created millions of refugees now living in camps throughout the Middle East, in places like Turkey, Jordan, and Lebanon. Here's a story of how CBN's Orphans Promise brought help and hope to one family devastated by that war.
Laura and her brother Bilal walk through the tents of this refugee camp in Lebanon every day. They and their mother have struggled to get by on their own ever since the Syrian war engulfed the city of Homs and their father was killed.
A large bomb hit our house. My dad and some of my relatives died. I still get really sad when I hear other girls saying, "Daddy, Daddy," because I can't say that anymore. We barely made it out of Syria, but life here has been very hard. We came with nothing and we relied on charity of our neighbors to survive.
Laura's mother told me one of her biggest worries now is her children's future.
It really hurt Lara not being able to go to school. She is such a smart child, and I just wanted her and Bilal to have a chance to do all the things that I could not.
So Heart for Lebanon, with support from CBN's Orphans Promise, invited Lara and Bilal to attend our Hope Center, a school dedicated to educating refugee children. Here, they're learning math, Arabic, English, and music. They're also taught about Jesus Christ.
I didn't know about Jesus before coming here. It makes me so happy to know Jesus loves us and is always with us. Jesus is my God and he never lies. So I try to be like him.
I like to write and color and play with my friends, and I really like to sing songs about Jesus.
At the center, we also show Superbook in Arabic.
The show is amazing because we learn stories from the Bible, and I get excited learning about God. I go home each day and tell my mom everything I have learned. My kids tell me about Jesus Christ all the time, and when I'm feeling depressed, they say I should pray. So I do. It feels great.
And every month, Heart for Lebanon and Orphans Promise give food to Laura's family and thousands of other refugees.
I can't thank Heart for Lebanon and Orphans Promise enough for everything they have done for us. The Christians are the ones who have really helped us. I love Heart for Lebanon and Orphans Promise because they are helping us like God teaches us to help others. Dear God, please bless and take care of the orphans of Syria. And please bless the Christians who have opened the school. Dear Lord, please bless them and keep them safe. Amen.
That's a great story. Orphans Promise helps families like Lara's all over the world. Well, that's it for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And if you like Jerusalem Dateline, please share us on your social network. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.